Greetings, everybody. My name is Andrew Morse. I'm the head of Bloomberg Television in the U.S., and I'm pleased to be here to talk about the $2.2 trillion battle for your living room. It's a pretty expensive battle. Joined here by Doug Selby, the managing director of Selby Ventures. Doug Barry, rather. Ryan Kavanaugh, the founder and CEO of Relativity. Tom Rogers, the CEO of TiVo, and Mike White, CEO of DirecTV. And just in terms of setting the stage here for a minute, when I thought about the battle for the living room, I was thinking back to my own experience in my living room as a kid. And there were really distinct viewing experiences I can remember. First Super Bowl I watched, Super Bowl 14, the Rams and Steelers. I remember it like it was yesterday. And every Super Bowl since then, I pull up and I watch it, and I watch it live. Remember being a kid and my parents getting all excited because The Wizard of Oz was on once a year on one channel. And we would get together, we'd make popcorn, and we'd sit there and we would watch it as a family. And I remember watching Saturday Night Live. Got a little bit older, and at 11:30 at night, my parents would let me stay up late, and I watched the golden age of Saturday Night Live. Never missed it. And I remember sitting there, oddly, since I went into news for a living, getting really annoyed because my parents would watch the evening news at 6:30, never quite realizing that the era of Walter Cronkite or Peter, Tom, and Dan would end sort of within my lifetime, or at least certainly begin a distinct decline. But all of that I mentioned just as a preamble to start this conversation, in the sense that our living room has changed. In 1976, the average family had 7 channels in their household. In 1991, it was 33. In 2008, it was around 118.6. I like the 0.6. Today, DirecTV, if I'm right, Mike, has over 190 different channels. That's a lot. So my question is for each of you, and maybe this is a good way to have some subtle introductions, is in a world where you have that many channels and you have multiple devices and you have content all over the place and you have apps, how do we begin to differentiate? How do companies begin to differentiate each other, whether you're in the distribution business, the content business, or the investing business? Mike, maybe we can start with you.
Well, I think you've got content everywhere now. It's not even a living room anymore. The average DirecTV household has 3 televisions, and we're working hard to stream on their iPads, their iPhones, their Androids, and everything else. So, I mean, people are watching wherever they are. And so it's way more than the living room. But when you think about differentiation, I think it starts with having a powerful brand. And I'm lucky, I'm a brand guy, spent 20 years at PepsiCo, and DirecTV has the best brand in the business. But brands don't stay there if you don't invest. And we're continually investing in the customer relationship to try and strengthen the way we work with customers, make it easier to do business with us. We've kind of tried to move towards recognizing loyalty as opposed to the new guy gets the deal in some of the strategy changes we've had the last couple of years. So I think it starts with the customer relationship and loyalty. Clearly, we also think you have to differentiate yourself with the product. And whether it's our mixed channels or whether it's what we do with our independent audience network with Rogue as one example, or Damages, or the Dan Patrick Show, it's finding unique ways to differentiate the product, best sound and picture, whatever. I mean, you got to work on all fronts. I mean, the one thing that's clear, it's a hyper-competitive industry, not just within the pay TV space, but outside of it. And when you think about differentiation, you got to think about your content, your service, and the product itself. And you got to have multiple layers of differentiation, and you can't stop investing.
And that makes sense. And Tom, for your business, I mean, TiVo came onto the scene as a leader. I mean, TiVo was the first of a device that allowed you to watch TV differently, in much the same way that the VHS was at a certain point in time. But TiVo is now a much different kind of service and much different box, if you will. So how do you differentiate from the other competitors?
Well, when TiVo started, it was a world the way you defined it. It was people got a certain number of channels depending on where you subscribed. Some got more, some got less. And the issue was being able to capture a program, watch it when you wanted to, not being a captive of a schedule. Today, you can't really define the world in terms of number of channels. An average TiVo customer today probably has access to 8 million pieces of entertainment content coming into their television set when you count Spotify and Netflix and Amazon and YouTube and Hulu and all their linear offerings and their VOD offerings. It's really approaching infinite choice. And now we look at the world very differently. There are three primary missions we have. First, you got to bring all that in and do it in a way that organizes it, because otherwise it's chaos. You have to bring some degree of navigation and menuing and organization to all that choice, so there's an ease of access. Two, as Mike was saying, you have to mobilize it, so to speak. You have to get it to the various screens and around the house and in the different ways that people want to get at it. And then third, and this is probably the newest horizon for us, but the one that I think will ultimately most define the future of the television experience, is you have to personalize it. You have to take all that choice and get it down with the right data inputs that you're capturing about that viewer to get at any given time exactly what they most care about and have in front of them. And that's a totally different world than when we started thinking about TiVo in its late 1990s form.
Okay, Ryan, you were recently described by Forbes magazine, I think, as the most watched man in Hollywood, which is interesting since, at some point you were a watched man on Wall Street. So being one of the most watched men in Hollywood, and you try to think about how to position Relativity, again, what's the differentiator for you? And in a world where there's a lot of content out there and Relativity makes a lot of content, where should we be looking for your content? Where can we find it? How do you approach that?
It's a good question for us. So I think probably of anybody on the panel, we don't really have any skin in the game. What I mean by we don't have any skin in the game, we're platform agnostic. We don't own any technology. We don't own, we're not an MSO. We're not a digital distributor. We're a content provider. And we're a studio both in television and film as well as in digital content. So for us, our primary purpose is to make good content, understand who the audience is we're making it for, and make it available in as many places as possible. And in the process of doing that, I think where we're a little bit different is that before we make any content, whether it's a movie or television show, or any other content for that matter, we know effectively that we're not going to lose money. And we hope to make upside on it. We can't guarantee, but we know we're not going to lose money. And I think that's really the two primary principles that drive us, is that we want to make good content. We want to know who our audience is. And it doesn't, you hear quite often, I think, I'm, blockbuster franchise. Well, to me, that doesn't really mean much. Yes, it's great to have a blockbuster and a franchise. And if you have $200 million to make a movie with and another $200 million to market it, you can go try and make a blockbuster franchise. And God forbid it doesn't work. You just lost $400 million. But from our perspective, it's about understanding what that means. So, there's four quadrants, obviously. It's two age demographics and gender. And it's about understanding how much I'm spending to get to which parts of those audience. So am I going after all four? Am I going after two? Am I going after one? And making sure that I understand that my break-even analysis is acceptable. And then making sure I work with all the platforms. So we work very closely with DirecTV. We work with TiVo. We work with, Netflix. We work with Hulu, Amazon, iTunes, in-store, out-of-store. And, so for us, the end goal is just really to see that the content is available in as many places and as easily accessible for the consumer as possible.
And Doug, for you, how important is that when you're looking to make investments in terms of accessibility and availability of content, partnerships, being platform agnostic? Is that something that's important to you as an investor?
Sure. It was one of the reasons we decided to invest in Pandora early on. We saw the proliferation of music and obviously the consumption of music across devices, across the internet. And this is the beginning days of the iPod and iTunes. And we met a kid who said, the future's not going to be just about consuming the music, but making good recommendations on the web. There's going to be so much of it that somehow it needs to be curated, recommended, and personalized for different tastes, and make it more democratic in that more music can get to the people who might enjoy it. At the time, we were licensing the software into kiosks. It was not a very good business. We decided one day to maybe apply that to the web. So my opinion is content is king, but curation and ease of use is also king. I think that both need to work hand in hand. If you look at the history of the digital music business and the MP3 player, there were lots and lots of MP3 players before the iPod. I think there were maybe 100 different ones. And there are different ways to access that. But it was Steve Jobs that really figured out that content was important, how connected to the device was important, and how to simply and seamlessly connect your experience to the device you cared about. And so I really think it's the combination of content and simplicity and connectivity that creates the magic in at least the stuff I look at.
I think that's a great point. I get asked all the time, what's the future of television? It always reminds me of Yogi Berra's great line, the future isn't what it used to be. And when you apply the thought about the music industry, I think when it comes to television, the future is what it used to be, and the future of television is the music model. And people hear that and they say, you're crazy. Television didn't get run over by the digital transition the way music did. Music got crushed by it. Television has been able to navigate that far better and avoid the compression of its business models that music suffered. But what music did end up being able to do is to provide a consumer experience where you can get access to anything ever produced. You can get it in any playlist form or personalized format that you want. You can connect it to most devices that you want it on. It can follow you personally from the cloud. And it ultimately creates a get anything you want wherever you want it in a personalized form, which television really hasn't begun to get close to yet. And the goal, television ultimately will have that model, that you will have access to any video you want. You will have it in a comprehensive package from the cloud that will follow you to any device, that will give you the ability to personalize it. But there are a lot of pieces of the television equation that have to come into alignment in order for that vision to play out for the television world. And ultimately, that's what we're moving toward. How do we empower both the B2B side and the consumer to enjoy that model for television, which, while music went through it on a very painful basis, ultimately delivered to the consumer a wonderful outcome.
For the consumer, yes, not necessarily for the music labels, though.
Well, I said that. They got crushed. Television's been much smarter about the digital transition, and the fact that it's gone slower has meant that there are all kinds of ways that it can deal with how do you get to that ultimate vision that I think will protect many of the incumbents of the television world in a way incumbents in the music world suffered some terrible downturns. But I think ultimately television will get to where music is today.
I agree with one difference. I think that we often look at where we think the future will be of television, and nobody can read the tea leaves per se, but just so that not because we want to own technology, but frankly just so we can try and understand who we're making content for, and what the model is, and understanding the financial implications. The big difference between television and radio, and I don't, this has nothing to do with DirecTV. I'm talking more about the stations themselves. Is not that the stations were smarter than the music distributors. It's that you can put music out there. If you got $1,000 and there was a computer or even less, you can go make basically a professional album. And it was the increase in technology and the availability of basically a professional recording studio on a computer that allowed for music to transition along with the technology. Television, I actually think that I've seen the exact same thing in television as I have in music, which is, everybody's fighting the new technology. They're suing everybody to stop it, and we don't want it. It's going to kill it, and eventually they'll buy it. And that will become their model. And in music, the exact same thing happened. The problem was, by the time that the platforms like iTunes and others had gained enough market share that the labels, frankly, and the incumbents in the music business were actually saying, oh no, this is going to work, maybe we should buy them, they were gone. And because the content was so cheap. The television guys, by blocking it, are the guys making $1 million to $100 million content, and every guy in his basement can't provide that. So they can actually just say, we're not providing the content, and try and slow the process down that way.
Well, and so inevitably there will be conflicts. We've seen them. DirecTV had one with Viacom in the past. We saw one with Dish and AMC. There inevitably are going to be these battles between content and distribution. And Mike, as you look at your business and some of those battles, where do you think the future lies in the content versus distribution war?
Well, first of all, I don't know any of my peers in the pay TV industry who are kind of sitting around with their hands, tied behind their backs, kind of saying, watching all this change going and saying, well, let's just sue our way out of it, okay? We certainly aren't a DirecTV. I mean, we're the original over-the-top guys, literally, with the satellites in the sky. And, we are embracing the technology, but I think what sometimes gets mixed to this point about content is, look, there's technology change, and then there's the whole world of the content ecosystem and how that needs to evolve. And frankly, I've been out there pretty publicly saying, I think collectively as an industry, we better figure out a way to give our consumers a bit more choice than we do today, or we're all going to be toast. And the fact of the matter is there is a temptation on the part of the media companies and the sports leagues to want you to tax a customer and not tell them and just throw it in a bundle. And, some things in a bundle are good. I mean, bundles have given America an amazing amount of content versus when it was tried fully a la carte in Japan. You end up kind of devolving to averages, which I don't think is the right answer. But frankly, when I look at a new sports network and we do consumer research and 90% of the consumers say, I'm not going to pay extra for that network, I got to stand up for our customers. So, frankly, I'm trying to represent our customers in these. And the funny thing is, it's a little bit like the federal government. I'm not looking to lower the fees. I'm just trying to get them down to something affordable for most Americans where they're growing at a rate that's more sustainable for the long haul. And I think that's a bit of the pull and tugs that you see going on in the industry right now. But frankly, it's a golden time for content. And I mean that from a consumer standpoint. I mean, there's more great stuff out there, not just on DirecTV. I mean, we have our Pandora app. I love our Pandora app on DirecTV. And so, we're trying to embrace the technology, evolve the technology, be anywhere and everywhere the consumer wants to consume it, but at the same time, keep the packages more affordable and frankly be more flexible, because I think it's a threat to the industry, and it'll end up in Washington, D.C., which isn't in anybody's interest if we don't figure it out.
I agree with Mike. I just wanted to say first of all, I have that premium package, $7,000 a year, so don't hold anything else to say against me. And my head of TV says that whatever I say, is not his opinion at all, and he loves our relationship. So, the only thing I want to add on is, what I, meant, I don't think you guys have been the most prolific and certainly the most, forward-looking of we've got to give more, and we love working with you guys and have done 5 or 6 things I think that were really proactive in trying to give the consumers access to earlier things and bigger windows and longer time and real time. What I mean is when you look at a telecom model, and I look at I actually think it's less like music and more like telecom. You look back when everybody had a landline, and then when with the advent of mobile, you went, well, some people are buying mobile phones, but nobody's going to get rid of landlines, right? And now you look today, and whatever it is, 25% of homes, or the numbers, they don't have a landline. They've never had a landline, and a lot of people are canceling it. And it's not. I don't think it's. When I look at that, I don't believe at the end of the day it's, oh my God, all landlines are going to be gone and everybody's going to be mobile, or the other way around. But when you break up the market segment, I see a very similar trend occurring, which is you have the guys that never had landlines. You have guys that have never had any type of MSO or satellite or any other type of subscription service, and they just consume content when they want it. You got guys that will never change, like myself, because I don't invest in any shows from a personal level. I come home from work, I want to watch it quickly. I want to pick on the spot. And then I think you got guys that can be swayed either way, and eventually you're going to break up the market. And what I see, what is concerned, is things like Aero, which I think is a really cool concept. It gives everybody what they want. What I mean by that is, if someone like DirecTV were, owned an Aero-like platform, what I see is you guys, on top of your technology, you own the consumer, and that's the most important, asset you guys have, is the consumer loyalty to you guys. So if you could say to the consumer, you can have it for free and pay to have 12 channels, or you can have it for $150 or $7,000 and have everything else. That to me is where I think the ultimate could go.
Well, we had antennas in the box before. Rest assured, if it's legal, and we'll see, because it doesn't work as a single antenna technology.
No, right.
It works as a field.
It has to be a field.
And if you're going to get, if he's going to get around the copyright laws and get it for free, I'm going to make sure my customers have that opportunity, one way or the other. But, I think our focus is on our customers and trying to make sure that we can provide a great value, great service. And as I said, I think, flexibility to say I want to lease, or I want to buy the equipment, or I want to wireless and not wire the home. All of those options are going to be out there. And I think, we're going to try hard to meet those consumer needs as they evolve. And I think you'll see any. I mean, you buy a Samsung Smart TV, you can put any of the apps up there.
Yeah.
Right. I think people just want the content they want.
That's right.
They want it
when they want
where
it.
they want it.
When they want it, where they
I
want it.
came home the other day, and I didn't know who all I was paying, but I saw my, my college-age son playing a game on his PC, my daughter watching Disney Channel, my other son watching an episode of Heroes on the iPad, and then my wife doing whatever she was doing. But I was looking at all these things, these mobile devices, the PC. Oh, I had one other kid watching Netflix on through the Xbox. And I went, wow, this really is amazing to have all these different devices in the home, all these personalized entertainment experiences, and they're doing it on different devices, and they all seem quite satisfied. So I think, unfortunately or fortunately, the future is going to look different than the past. I think there's going to be lots of different ways to consume content that's appropriate for you on a device that's more yours, but I don't think it's one or the other. I think you're going to do it in many different ways. I was in the gaming business back in the 90s, and there's this war, not the war, but this battle between console devices, computer devices, mobile gaming devices. There was a theory that everything was going to be mobile and everything was going to be console and everything was going to... The fact of the matter is it's both. Mobile has been complementary to the console business and vice versa. There have been periods where mobile platforms have been popular. There have been periods where consoles, they provide different value props at different times in your life. So I don't think it's an either or proposition. I think what is important is to make it really easy to get to the content that you want, regardless of the device. And I think that's the hard part. Being able to allow the consumer to get to the content they want easily. I don't think they want a bunch of cords. I don't think they want a bunch of worrying about the inputs. I don't think they want to worry about, there's a bunch of things. They want it to be easy and seamless.
We need to
Well,
get
that's
you
why
a
Arrows-
DVR box. You'll be all set.
But that's the issue, though. The ease part means you got to get to a music type model, because short of that, you're dealing with multiple boxes, multiple remotes, multiple user interfaces, not knowing where to search where for what content. And the only way that is ultimately going to get solved, if there truly is access to all content through any device, and you're able to customize and personalize that experience the way you individually want to consume it. And television's got a ways to go to get there. Now, the whole question is, television, as I said, has been smart in avoiding getting run over, but on the other hand, if it doesn't go fast enough, it could still be run over. And you can't underestimate the appetite of the American public for more choice. And if there's a lot more choice out there, and as an operator you're not delivering it, they're going to find it. And the issue is, how do you embrace, in what is now called the over-the-top world, without being in a position that it undermines your current model? And I think there are ways to do that. It reminds me of the very wealthy guy who has a much younger second wife, and the guy asks his younger second wife, "Honey, if I lost all my money, would you still love me?" And she looks at him and says, "Well, of course, honey, I'd still love you, but I'd miss you terribly." And that could easily happen in the operator world if that choice is viewed as secondary, if it's not viewed as really being able to deliver to the viewer everything that they want when they know it's out there and they know they can get it. And the issue is going to be how to deliver that comprehensive nature of that package while holding on to your existing customer base and not letting the Arios of the world or the other over-the-top enablers who are trying to take piecemeal elements of that and undermine the current operator offering.
So I mean, Reed Hastings last week in a paper to his shareholders basically said linear television's dead. Not today, but tomorrow, and it's dead because technology is changing, consumer behavior is changing. We're going to see 4K, super fast, super high quality video. Linear TV is dead, and we've been discussing how it's probably not dead quite yet, but Netflix is doing quite well. How do you view when you see those comments from Reed? Is he right?
Well, I don't know what you mean by linear TV. If you're talking about watching something at a specific time, I mean, I think live television is not dead, right? People love to watch sports live. Do people want on-demand? Of course they do. On-demand has been the hallmark of television watching, certainly since cable, right? I mean, the whole point of cable was to give the consumer personalized programming. CNN, MTV, Cartoon Network, HBO. It's all about giving personalized programming, or on-demand, if you will, as best as they could. So do I think people are going to want to consume entertainment on their own schedule? Absolutely. Do they want to watch multiple episodes of Mad Men, simultaneous binge watching? Absolutely. Do I think that's the end of television? No, particularly not live television. I think people want to personalize entertainment and consume it on their own schedule.
But does that create a problem for, let's say, DirecTV?
No, I've consistently said, look, people kind of throw everything in and they forget about $65 billion in ad revenues that music industry didn't have, that are kind of a lot of reasons why our media partners are the ones who are making the decision about what they do with this content, a la carte or not. And where do you stop? Do you stop at channel? Do you stop at show? I mean, we're adapting our system for shows, okay? You know, and really kind of taking a page out of the TiVo book originally, and thinking about shows you might watch, personalized, social. You want to go on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. I'm more than happy to compete with our highway and price content however it's priced. And I'm pretty confident, given the efficiency. I mean, we get the best sound and picture. You get to 4K, by the way, and that is the next one coming in the next 2 years. That's going to suck a huge amount of bandwidth. We got 2 more satellites going up next year. We're going to be fine, and we're going to be ready for 4K. So we will have the best sound and picture. We invest a heck of a lot of money in our user interface. We've got voice coming. And we have, and just billing and collecting 20 million bills a month and chasing that is a bit of a process too in our service. So, there's a lot more to a service that what we do than just a la carte on content or not. But heck, my own view is, as an industry, we need to find ways to give consumers a bit more choice collectively. I think it's important, and I think we need to move faster on TV everywhere. Collectively.
I was going to say TV everywhere is exactly, TV everywhere, in my opinion, is where it's going for sure, and we have to figure out how to get there. But, excuse me, the impediment or roadblock is not you guys, actually. You guys are basically, from what I've seen, even with people, like Arrow, you guys are like, look, we're open. We just want to give the consumer the best experience. So when I'm referring to the, people suing, I mean, I heard Les Moonves yesterday say, I'm going to sue them all the way to the end, and if they win, I'm going to take my content off free TV. It's appropriate that you're asking about Reed, because Netflix, we were Netflix's first studio deal. And when we made the deal with them, every single other studio was basically saying Netflix is going to be dead and it's the stupidest model. And in fact, I won't say who, but I know they were potentially getting in litigation with a studio who was saying, we're not going to sell you second-run content at 10 times the price anybody else will pay, because, we're not going to adapt your business model. Right. And when we did the deal, there was a lot of controversy about where we're changing the window and it was going to kill the movie business, and now Disney signed with them and DreamWorks signed with them, and everybody's, Netflix is great. And I see this as a very similar situation. The same guys that before were fighting Netflix are fighting this kind of change, the TV everywhere, and it's us. I mean, I'm one of the people who are the content makers, but people who also own, distribution networks. And they're doing a great job of keeping it in by saying, listen, someone needs to put $10 million in studios and blah, blah, blah into these shows, and fine, we're just not going to do it if you guys are going to go adopt, an iTunes model. That being said, if they don't start adopting a TV everywhere strategy, then someone like Arrow will find a way to own this.
Great. Well, I don't really believe Netflix wants linear television to go away. And if he was quoted saying that, I don't really think he meant that. Netflix benefits enormously from linear television today. Broadcast had a syndication market that was cable channels that, as Les Moonves said yesterday, still the most popular shows on an awful lot of cable channels are reruns of broadcast shows from his network. Cable then mushroomed as an original platform for programming, but cable shows really didn't have a syndication market, so to speak, where they could get a next window. They just kind of ended up without a future source of revenue beyond their cable channel airing. In a lot of ways, Netflix has created that market, and Netflix hugely benefits from the popularity of shows that people discover on these linear channels and then want more of, or binge view, or whatever they want to do within the Netflix package. And there's a real balance there. Of course, if Netflix became a place where it aggregated all first-run cable shows and you could see them as soon as they were on their linear channel, you'd say goodbye to the linear channels. But that's not going to happen because the linear channels know that they would not get the money they're getting from Mike and cable operators, which are the basis of funding them. So there's a real balance there. The TV everywhere issue is, does Netflix have a competitor that arrives that's far more significant in terms of the comprehensiveness of the aggregation of programming if the current operator industry really could make a package out of all the TV everywhere content coming from today's linear channels, and somehow through their linear channel VOD negotiations end up with the operator having the right to that bundle of all that content availability and somehow it not going to Netflix. And right now, the way the channels are playing that, it's, well, you know, we got to be really careful. We want more money from people like Mike, and so we don't want to give up those rights in a wholesale fashion. And Netflix is sitting there saying, well, we'll pay you some more, but the channels are saying, well, we got to be careful of that window and how quickly people can get at it through Netflix because we know we'll dry up our source of revenue. And so there's a balancing act going here, but ultimately there will be a single remote, a single box, a single ability to get it to any device, and a single ability to get all content, even if that's coming in through multiple aggregators, because it will be united through a common interface that people subscribe to that give you that access. But Netflix should not, and I don't think is, cheering for the end of linear television.
Why does it have to be so extreme, though? I mean, this is what I don't understand. You know, I hear half the time, you know, on this side, you know, everybody's trying to fight. Oh my God, if someone comes, I mean, and I only use Arrow as an example because it happens to be the hot topic, and it's a you know, when I say Arrow, I mean anything like Arrow. You know, you got half the people saying, you know, oh my God, you know, this is going to kill linear TV, and if it comes out, everybody's going to do this, and you know, you got other guys going, you know, we have to keep linear TV, and you know, and you know, it's just one or the other. And when I look at it, I mean, I go back to the cell phone analogy. You know, there's those people that are not going to give up what we refer to here as linear TV. You know, just a broad DirecTV subscription. They're just not. I'm one of them. I think it's 50% of today's market. Maybe it's 30% of tomorrow's market. Maybe it's 25% of the market in 100 years from now, or 25 years, or however quick technology moves. And you got guys who are never going to subscribe for linear TV. You know, they're doing everything they can. Whether, you know, I've been reading that these 15-year-olds are buying old antennas and sticking them back, you know, like the ones that my parents had when I was 3. They're putting them on their roof again to get free TV on the air, you know, that are 15 and 16 and 17 years old or 20 years old. So then you're going to have those guys that are always going to find ways, and that's going to be 20% of the market, to not have linear TV. They'll get on air and they'll pay transactionally for everything else. And then you have people in between that, you know, they might pay a little basic fee, and then they'll transactionally buy what they want. But I also don't believe it's going to be one platform because, again, content, it's not the music business. It's not $1.99 to make. It's $100 million or $30 million to make, and someone has to pay for it. And that means you're going to have multiple places that are going to pipe that information in. It's not going to be to one source, iTunes. It might be that cloud computing allows people to personalize it and make it one type of personalization where they can say, I want to pick this to have these 6 channels here, and I want to pick this to have, you know, this show pop up here, and I'll pay $1.99 for that to be available, and I'll pay $5.99 because I like the programming in this one channel, and my package is $26, and this is what it looks like, and this is how it runs.
That's the point. It's not going to be a single brand that owns all content. That's not the music model. The issue is going to be a user experience that unites access to all of that, even though the underlying collections are coming from a variety of aggregators of content. And we're making a lot of progress toward that goal. I mean, today, if you're a Comcast subscriber and if you have TiVo, you can go buy a TiVo at a Best Buy or a Walmart, and you can plug it in, and you have access to all their linear channels, and you get access to their video on demand, and you have a great approach to how you can record that linear content, and then you can get your Amazon and your Hulu and your Netflix and YouTube, et cetera, and it's all united through a single interface, even though you're getting that provided through a number of brand aggregators.
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, I think something Ryan touched on, it is the question of whether it is an either or, whether there are 50 shades of gray to this. And I think, to put a fine point on what Reed said, he points out over 1 billion hours a day of linear TV are consumed right now. That's a lot of hours. But he says internet TV will replace linear TV, apps will replace channels. And he points to, of course, Netflix, but also HBO, ESPN, brands that are innovating in terms of creating the content. And I think Tom, it does come back to what you're saying then, if that content is out there, creating the delivery systems and the ability to access that content is great. But when you have TiVo and Apple TV and Roku and Xbox and now potentially Amazon, in addition to the MSOs, how do you control the way in which the content is delivered to the consumer? How do you make it easy, to touch on something that we mentioned earlier today?
Well, the operator has a great advantage there, because linear, look, even if you take the 30 million people who watch more, who are the biggest consumers of streaming video, they still watch 10 times more linear television than streaming television. I'm saying the 30 million. The 5 million core who may be so involved in non-linear consumption and just watching streaming television is a different issue. But it broadened that to the 30 million people who today watch the most streaming television, and they still watch 10 times more linear TV than others. And operators are still going to be delivering, I think, for a good time, a package of things that includes live sports that most viewers are going to continue to want to get. Now, you can get really confused here if you look at 18 to 24-year-olds and what they're doing, because it is fair to say that you're probably at about 24% of viewing in that demographic today, which is streaming, a la carte access to TV. If you look at television users overall, it's gone from about 3% to 6%, and meaning 94% of all viewing, if you exclude that younger demographic, is still overwhelmingly coming in through a linear and recorded television model. I think that gives the operator an enormous opportunity here to capture all that choice that the over-the-top element represents and figure out how to really be the ones who are offering a great linear experience, a great way to record that, because not all rights are going to be available for that programming to be on demand, and recording television in some form for a substantial period of time is going to continue to be something consumers want. And get the over-the-top content as part of that. There are some real issues. Netflix does not have the right today to offer its service through an operator-owned box. That's a huge issue that needs to be confronted. The operators, many would like to offer Netflix as part of their bundle. Netflix doesn't have the studio rights to enable it to do that. So there are clearly some structural elements here that are going to have to be worked through. But I think the incumbent operators, particularly, not to take anything away from Mike, because I think DirecTV has done a phenomenal job of staying ahead of where all kinds of pundits said it would be, because somehow satellite technology was going to be a limiting factor that didn't allow it to compete with cable with its broadband pipe. But cable with a high-speed pipe going forward could have a truly unique advantage. So far, they haven't driven that advantage in a way that has allowed them to really be the guys who are the front runners. We'll see if that changes.
Let me just say one thing here. I agree. I think pay TV, whether it's satellite, cable, I do think that they offer important content today that's not available elsewhere. I think predominantly sports, that's my opinion, and Disney, kids content. It's amazing how important that content is for families and viewers. I think the challenge for the pay TV guys is to make sure that the pricing model and the choices match what the consumers want. fast enough. And I think right now, I think that HBO Go, Watch ESPN, HBO To Go, I think those are really good offerings, and that's exactly the right direction. The question is, how quickly do they continue to move, and how quickly do the service providers offer the package and the pricing, whether it's a la carte or not? I don't think there's one model. I think anyone says there's one pricing model needs to have their heads examined. I have this conversation about Pandora all the time. Is it Pandora? Is it Spotify? Is it Apple? I say, you know what? I think it's all. Right? Some people want to sit back and they want to have an easy experience and they want to put on a playlist on at a party. Others want to choose the music they want to listen to, and they only want to listen to that music. Some people want to pay and not hear commercials. Some people will sit back and hear commercials and not. So I think there's not one right answer, but I do think in the pay TV world, one needs to move quickly in providing that mobility everybody wants, that access, but more importantly, the pricing program that I think the consumer wants, young and old.
I'd like to, obviously, I'm pretty clear where I stand on this. I think this market is incredibly fractured, and I completely agree that, there needs to be a model that's going to give something to everybody because they're all going to want something different. I use the telecom model over and over, but one thing I need to say, we have to go back to the Reed thing for a minute, which plays into this, because Reed did say that, and he meant it flat out. He meant that he thinks linear TV is dead, and without agreeing with him or not agreeing with him, when he actually benefits greatly from linear TV being dead. It's actually completely the opposite of what was just said. Because when you look, as Mike knows, he has about 22% of his subscribers are at risk right now. He's worried that 22% might leave. And that's the general market, as there's 22% at-risk subscribers. When you actually look at what percentage of those who are using Netflix that at-risk represents, it's 50% of Netflix, 50%. So, it's a proven fact through, we've all read the same studies, but, Netflix pushes people to become at-risk users. Now, one of the things that I think, when Reed says he thinks linear TV is dead, it's because he's killing linear TV in his mind, and he hopes to, if he keeps doing that, he's going to be the guy left standing. That being said, I also read a lot of the research with those at-riskers, that 22%, and they can be kept, and the 18% that have left will come back if they're offered a viable alternative that gives them what they want, when they want it, and a personalized service. And I think Mike at DirecTV have been out there saying, we're ready to do it, and I think it's us and it's the content owners and the network distributors that have to figure it out.
Yeah, I think it's important, though, not to mix metaphors here. So there are some consumers, we have a bunch of our consumers that love Netflix. And if you think of Netflix as another HBO, which frankly I do, it's just another channel, okay? And Reed does a great job with that channel, and it doesn't surprise me that he believes what he believes. It won't surprise you that I believe differently. Right. I worship at a different church. But nevertheless, what I wouldn't mix up is two really different issues. One is those who just like an $8, with a bunch of good stuff, versus I think, to Doug's point, the risk we're running as an industry with pricing having to go up because content and sports rights are out of control, is that we do run a risk if we don't find some different pricing models. And that's what I was trying to suggest, is we've got to collectively find a way to give the consumer a little more choice, short of, frankly, going all the way to a la carte shows. Because if you do that, you're going to undermine the whole economics of the entire media industry around advertising and eyeballs and the way they create scale to create great content. And I think, it behooves us in the industry to continue to push hard to find ways to come up with some new pricing models that will work and be more consumer friendly. I think that's right.
Well, Mike, but one could argue that Barry Diller's doing that now, and it's rare that you get everybody lined up against them, but the broadcasters don't like it, the studios don't like it, the sports leagues
because
don't like it.
The broadcasters have been very clear that they need two revenue streams, and they intend to get $4 billion a year out of us. So how is it that Barry can get it for free, and my consumers, my 20 million households, have to pay for it? I mean, the fact of the matter is, that's not going to work. Okay?
I agree with Mike 100% in the sense
it's money.
That at the end of the day, the economics, the system would collapse. The difference between this and the music business is when the music business did this, you still had the same quality music available. Because at the end of the day, you don't need a $1 billion or $10 billion or $100 billion financial institution to make music. But if this, 100% right on this panel, I think that I've heard everybody pretty much in agreement with. I think is that if we don't find a pricing model and delivery model that goes with the pricing model that gives people what they want, and that we have. I look at the market. I break it up into 4 segments. The guys who are never going to cut the cord, so to speak. The guys who've already cut the cord. The guys who might cut the cord, and kind of potentials in between.
Yeah.
And I think and I don't think it's going to change. Percentages might flip around, but I think you're always going to have those 4 types. And if we can give those 4 types all the pricing model that works for them, then we've won as an industry. But if you're 100% right, Mike, that if we don't end up, if we just end up giving it for free, how do I spend $1 million on a TV
right
show,
now,
I'm screwed.
just 2 statistics. So Reed's cost of content is about $5.
Yeah.
My cost of content, just content, no meat, no nothing, just the cost of content is over $45.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, content costs what it costs.
Yeah.
All right, let's be careful not to compare today's newspaper and the library, because they're different. I mean,
Yeah.
Reed has a different model. All I'm saying is that, look, we're investing in our highway, we're investing in our service, we're investing in having a better user experience, a better user interface, and all of that. I think one of the core challenges for us as an industry
Pricing model.
is the pricing model.
Well, yeah. If my point on that was, I'm in total agreement with you. Whether the content costs $4 or $45 is irrelevant. If the end consumer's only paying $1,
Right.
then it's not just your problem.
No,
I hate to use the word, but then
I
we're
agree.
screwed because how am I going to deliver a $5 million show to you?
People have been predicting that technology was going to take down the quality of content and the quantity of quality content. And over the last 5 years, you've seen a mushrooming through AMC, History Channel, all kinds of cable and satellite outlets, a quality of programming that has tracked this whole trend of over-the-top and new technology that's made it easier to access programming. And I find it hard to not take a lesson from that if done right and done gradually, so incumbent players do have the ability to adjust to these things, that the march of technology can be a good thing for quality programming and the quantity of quality programming. And Netflix, again, if it thinks that at $10 a month, it can support what is out there today by way of quality programming because they've hit a good price point that 36 million people will get to, that's just not real. You can't produce at the kind of levels that quality content takes what is out there today in the channel environment. They can continue to benefit from the enormous promotion that these brands put into programming that drives people to want to get Netflix and have it available on demand and be able to binge view and do everything else. But the idea that Netflix at anything around the kind of pricing that it's talking about, just to the point Mike made, can eliminate linear television and maintain its value in the world and maintain the quality and quantity of programming in the world, that doesn't work.
So in terms of price point, I mean, Doug, how do we, when you're looking at it from an investor perspective and you take into account everything we've discussed in all of these issues, how do you reconcile that? I mean, where?
I don't know the right answer because I haven't looked at all the costs. What I can tell you, though, is I think people want to be able to consume what they want to consume in different ways. And whether that's a la carte or in a bundle or whether it's a suite of products, a channel, I think all of the above. I don't think it's going to be one. I think ESPN users are very passionate about ESPN and would be happily pay for it, particularly if it's an app they can take anywhere. I feel the same way about HBO. I feel the same way about Disney. There's a lot of brands that I think have channels that have a lot of legs. I also think there are shows people want. I think people want to pay for those shows. And I think there may be bundles that people want to pay for. I don't know what those are, but I'm sure that it's broader based and more personalized than what's available today.
But
So,
sports is a great example of the bundle world and access at a reasonable price relative to what it might be. If you took all the fees that ESPN takes in, and I don't know, it's probably been galloping at 10% or more price increases versus entertainment channels at 3 to 4% subscription fee on average type increases. Sports, obviously, through ESPN, a big galloping at a much higher rate of increase. And you divided that subscription fee pie just among the viewers of that channel, you're probably talking $500, $600, $700 a year per viewer that it would take if you were going to move to a viewer just pays for what he wants type model versus spreading that cost elsewhere. I'm not saying that isn't a better way for a lot of consumers for the pricing model to go, but it would have major implications in terms of how people would view the reasonable cost of some very popular programming versus how that model works.
Right, and by the way, and I'm not supporting this is the way one would do it, but it may be, there is a usage fee that's variable based on the content, right? There may be different devices. I'm not suggesting this is the right answer. There's a surcharge for extra devices. People will pay for convenience, and they will pay for mobility. So I don't know if there's just one right answer. I think there are different right answers, and it obviously needs to be tested. And I think you got to get out of this thinking of there's one pricing model.
Completely agreed. I think I don't think anybody knows what the right answer is, but I think what we haven't thought through is everybody's thinking about when I'm reading the reports and the research and all the extremes, all I see is well, here's the pricing model. It's free or it's expensive or it's $10 or it's 20 and how much is the transaction? I think what we haven't looked at is our entire universe, pretty much all of us here on the panel and everybody in the media business for that matter, we live in this symbiotic perfect relationship where, sports can only exist at the quality it exists because of DirecTV bringing it to the consumer and charging what it's charging so it can pay ESPN. I can only make movies because, at the level I can make them because after the theatrical side, DirecTV is offering it up on pay-per-view and then on, and supports HBO or Showtime, and then free TV is put through DirecTV and they'll pay enough that I can then make enough money to actually make a movie at $20 million. And same thing for television. And if you look all the way down that food channel, if this model isn't done perfectly, it affects sports, teams, owners, players. It affects every movie that's made and the ability to fund a $20 or $30 or $50 million movie. It affects every television show. And on the flip of that, and I think when you look at one of the other pieces is, there's a statistic that was mind-blowing to me. I think something like 20% of all internet usage now is and data is Netflix, which is like, so when I saw that, I went, well, wait a minute. Maybe this model isn't just about how much you pay on the box, but maybe it's about, paying for a certain type of bandwidth usage for whatever bandwidth you're consuming, and there's different ways to price that through, and different might be that I'm a high consumer on bandwidth of stuff when I want it. Maybe I pay it one way. If I'm a as I call it, a traditional linear guy, maybe I pay it another way. And these are the things we need to explore because it affects everybody on all the levels. And the only last thing I'll say on that is we tried the free model. We have it. It exists. It's called YouTube, and nobody watches channels on YouTube. And so we know that extreme doesn't work.
Well, what you just touched on to me, it sounds almost like the era of long distance telephone calls. If you were making it to go back to the whole notion of the landline, you wanted to make local calls, they're free. If you wanted to make long distance calls, you pay for them. But you also touch on something important. Mike, for you, we were talking about NFL Sunday Ticket before we began, which I think is a huge differentiator. For you, how important are products like that to your consumer, and is that the kind of content, or those the kind of deals that are crucial to your business going forward?
Well, we have a great relationship with the NFL. The NFL Sunday Ticket's been important to our brand. Talk about new technology. We've got a fabulous new second screen kind of fantasy football app we'll be launching this summer, so we're investing in that relationship. But frankly, there aren't that many things that are exclusive left in our industry. That's for us. We do some things with our mixed channels with Masters or with the U.S. Tennis Open and things like that to try and differentiate. But frankly, the economics of content are such that you want it on everything for the most part. So there are fewer and fewer of those exclusives that you can make the math work on. Because if you're a content owner, you want it on everything so you get paid. The math is the math.
The math is the math. But Tom,
you talk about, look, you can't even get the Dodgers and the Lakers for the price of the content costs on Netflix. Okay, so we have to deal with reality here, that there are costs that are that the content owners can demand and people will pay for.
Speaking of second screens, we've seen some fascinating data about when people engage with a second screen, which 9–10% of people now are saying they regularly engage with a second screen when they watch television, much more than that at some point when they watch television, but on a regular basis, 9–10%, and people tend to have greater brand affinity for brands, when they do engage through a second set, we're finding that far less likely people go to the bathroom during commercials when they're engaged in the second set. I haven't seen any studies of the long-term consequence of that issue, but I'm sure somebody will do one at some point. You know, the second screen evolution here of how television relates to either communicating socially, additional information that you're engaging with, opens up not only different consumption patterns, but really interestingly, and to date, not well developed at all, additional business models here for how advertising revenue in particular, potentially transactional revenue in terms of people transacting based on what's on the show, that can begin to support some of the things that may fall away as a result of changing bundles and changing consumption patterns on other fronts.
I think that's a very important point, because the second screen, you know, we did the first major second screen initiative with a network, with MTV, on a show we had called Catfish. And it was the first time pretty much ever done in a format where we were truly giving a second screen interactive experience 100% through the show. And through that, you know, the show ended up becoming MTV's #1 show and kind of in their history. And I don't believe it's because Catfish happens to be the greatest show, and that I mean, we like it, and I like it, you know, we love the show, but that it's the best thing MTV's ever had. I find that hard to believe. What I think is the engagement process that we gave, particularly the young viewers, which is what Catfish is targeting, to interact with the show, to be a part of the show, to invest in the brand, and even to your point, we told them when the commercials were so they could go to the bathroom. So in the second screen, it's like, okay, you know, in 6 minutes you have a commercial. And by the way, if you take the iPad to the bathroom and you answer a question in there, you can actually win stuff and get stuff and interact. And frankly, people are doing it. And so I think the reason I say it's such an important well, but whether it's in the bathroom or not, but it gets them to interact with the show and with the brand, and that actually becomes a whole other pricing model. So when we just talked about earlier, what's the pricing model? You know, that could be part of the pricing model as well.
Well, and I think, you know, just to summarize, I mean, I think that that's a good place for us to maybe ask one final question to the group. The second screen is to me, interesting. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's trying to figure it out. AMC is one place that I think is doing a particularly interesting job of creating a companion experience. But it gets right to the root of giving the customer what they want when they want, letting them engage more deeply with the content, differentiating, and I think perhaps to me most importantly, leveraging technology. Technology for technology's sake doesn't serve anybody. Technology in the context of this conversation to create a better consumer experience, to allow you to reach the consumers more appropriately, and to allow you to monetize differently, you know, seems to be crucial to this. So I guess I'd ask each of you, as you look forward and try to figure out this battle. By the way, point that I never got to, but it's worth thinking about in terms of this last answer. If we are indeed dealing with a $2.2 trillion battle, that's roughly the cost of the 9-year war in Iraq. You know, so we're dealing with a lot of money. So, you know, Doug, as you think about everything we've discussed today, you think about the technology, and you think about the future of this, you know, in the broadest of terms, what does the living room look like? The virtual, the literal or figurative living room 10 years from now?
I have no idea. No, I think ultimately it's going to be a major battle between all the players we've talked about, whether it's the cable companies, satellite guys. I think you're going to see a lot of interesting things out of, obviously, Apple, Google, Amazon, Samsung. I think you're going to see lots of Microsoft through the Xbox. Personally, I think it's going to be in the cloud. It's going to be streaming. It's got to be personalized. I think some form of a mobile device that either has my content or can grab that content that I can take anywhere I am, that also can be used in my living room, may be the way the industry goes. I'm not smart enough to know that's the way it's going to end up, but that's personally what I would like, is to have one device that controls both. I can watch it here, and this can be watched up on the screen. I think that's, or this can be taken out of the house, or this can be taken onto the plane. I think that's how we want to consume the content. And I don't know sitting here today who's going to win that battle and how it's going to get done, but I think that's ultimately what the consumer wants.
And as a content creator?
Well, I think Doug actually said it earlier, and it's something that our sponsor and our guru here, Mike, said to me early on in the business, which is content is king. And at the end of the day, I don't know in 10 years, I don't know that any of us can actually say this is exactly what it's going to look like. But I know that the content in this business, different than the music business, drives all of this consumer behavior. And it's what we're all actually, it's the reason the pricing is the way it is. It's because the content is expensive to make. And I don't see it getting cheaper. I see it getting more expensive. And therefore, the pricing model and the consumption model will have to support the content. And I think that's what everybody kind of forgets in this argument, a lot when I read about it, is they're talking about, well, you got to give them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and I agree with that. But at the end of the day, it's got to pay for the content, or you're going to get shitty content, and then it doesn't work at all. And I actually, when I think about what I believe it will look like, I wholeheartedly agree with Doug that it's going to be a very personalized experience that has to be ubiquitous. You have to be able to take it everywhere. And I think it looks like, to me, similar to what telecom looks like today. I think, telecom has internet phone and landline plug-in, and, you can be on cellular where you can pay as you go, and you can, be on cellular where you have a $200 plan. You can have unlimited data usage. You can pay high priced for your data. And I think when I look at, that Netflix is using 20% of bandwidth, and and you have people who 20% have cut the cord and some are at risk. I think you end up in a model where, you got guys that are paying higher for bandwidth. You got guys that will want to pay more of a bulk subscription and pay less for bandwidth. And, but the experience will be something that I think will be in the cloud or cloud-like environment, whatever the cloud is in 10 years from now, where, you have it personalized, you have it available to you, and you walk into your hotel room or your home or your office and you turn it on and it's the same everywhere.
Tom?
Any discussion like that always involves thinking about future technology, and we see things that engineers come up with all the time that they say, this is going to define the future of how people watch TV, and then you put them in front of consumers and they have this blank look on their face, the way my dog looks when I put the telephone up to his ear to talk to my son from college. I mean, it's just a total disconnect.
That could be a business, by the way.
A total disconnect sometime between those who toil in technological innovation and what will actually fly with consumers in the future. We saw that sputtering with 3D TV, which 2 years ago was the rage of CES and hasn't made a dent yet among consumers. But I will say this, that the television set remains the most expensive, the largest, still the most viewed screen in the house. And for the most part, it is still defined by a grid guide, which is the way the user experience is brought forward to the vast majority of homes. Mike's company has made much bigger strides in this regard than most, but the vast majority of homes, it's still defined by a grid guide, which when you compare the user experience to the tablet or the smartphone or the laptop, the television lags miserably. And I think that the television user experience is going to become more and more prized by consumers. Content, of course, will always be the ultimate thing people are after watching. Connectivity will be important, and it will get faster and allow for more bells and whistles. But in the end of the day, the user experience, whether it's provided by an operator or a third party, is going to be more and more prized. And we're just not going to be in a situation which kind of after 60 years since the advent of television is a bit absurd to contemplate. But you go up to a typical set-top box on a television today and you say, I want to watch the 1995 Oscar-winning best movie, and you can't do it. And nobody would be satisfied with that in a world of interacting with a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop. And so the television user experience is going to be upgraded significantly. And I think over time, as all of us were saying in different ways, ease, convenience, the way you access that choice, coming from multiple places but unified in some way that presents a far better experience than you have today is what's going to really define the future.
And Mike?
I think if you're going to be in this industry, you got to stay humble, you got to stay curious.
And the TV.
I mean, one of our values at DirecTV is agility and innovation. You've got to invest. I think we can all guess that you're going to have, the consumer is the one that's going to win. I don't think it's content versus distributors. You need both. The truth of the matter is if you think of a great flat screen smart TV from Samsung, you take 4K and the kind of crisp colors that you can see with that, which I've seen are just fabulous. You take the kind of the breadth of content from HBO Go to ESPN to even Netflix. I mean, the choices that a consumer has, and then you take a great sound and picture and user interface, and you make it available to consumers where they want it, when they want it, on whatever devices, and yes, we got to figure out the pricing model. I think it's the consumer that wins, but the key, if you want to be in this industry, you better be comfortable not knowing the answers, you better be curious, you better be doing everything you can to look around the corner, and you better invest and embrace those technology changes.
One thing I just want to add on is if you actually sat through the Singularity panel, then according to them in 2020, there's nothing, which is just going to all be in our brain. It's somebody that answered.
Exactly. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Thank you all.